this afternoon in Espanola for the Before I Die Festival. I'm Gail Rubin, your hostess with the mostest, the doyen of death. I want to thank our sponsors who make this festival possible before we get underway with the fabulous Daniel Gaillour.
Yes.
I pronounced it correctly, yay. A good goodbye, funeral planning for those who don't plan to die. That's me. The Daniels Family Funeral Home, DeVargas Funeral Home, where we are here in Espanola today. Everdays, which is an app that you can use to text people to let them know about memorial services or losses in the family that are taking place. French Funerals and Cremations, Gabaldon Mortuary. The Green Burial Council, Morris Hall Estate Planning Attorneys, My Final Checklist, which is a planner that helps you pull together all your information, and Passages International, which provides green and eco-friendly burial products and cremation products to the funeral industry. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Daniel, and we're going to talk about aging in place.
So, thank you. Wait till after it's done. Gail and myself, we met actually at a business networking event. And so this is an unusual venue for me. I'm really a real estate agent. She and I were talking at a networking event, and I think she brought it up to me, do people come in looking for a home that can accommodate an aging parent? And I said, funny you would say that. That happens a lot, particularly whenever I have a listing that's about 2,600 square feet or larger that has 4 bedrooms. We have, usually the audience type on that is somebody between 55 and 65 years old. And they're coming in, they're looking for a house for not only their existing family, because they still have some family at home. Generally, they're older teenagers or maybe some that are in college. And then they have a parent that they're thinking about moving in with them. Seldom have they ever talked to the parent that they're shopping for a house for them. And so I told her, I said, I get a lot of people coming in for that, but I don't actually recommend buying that house that they're shopping for. There was a time that I probably would have. I thought that was going to be a real niche for me because I do a lot of open houses, so I run into a lot of people, and a lot of the houses I do are about that size. So it would just seem to be a reoccurring audience person. Okay, it's a couple, mid-50s to mid-60s, looking for a house, generally with a casita. We want a casita or a 4th bedroom with its own bathroom. So maybe some statistics to start with. In the year 2000, there were 35 million Americans who were over the age of 65. By the year 2030, that number is expected to grow because the baby boomer generation is expected to grow to 70 million. So doubling. So I'm probably going to be seeing tons of 55 to 65-year-olds looking for a casita for their aging parents. So that's something I run into all the time. So I kind of just did some research on that because I thought this was going to be my niche in life, is to find homes for people like this. And I started doing some research, and I'll share some of my findings with you here in a minute, but I really had a change of mind because what was going to happen is those people were going to move out of a house that was probably already getting to be too big for them to move into a much larger house that was way too big for them, that their children were moving out of and their aging parent was not going to move into. So some of my own personal experiences with this. My parents had me later in life. I was a surprise to them. My mother was in her 40s, my dad was in his mid-40s. So basically my mom came home and said, you're not going to believe this, but we're having another child. So my parents were older. They both passed away in their 80s, and fortunately they had lots of children to care for them. but we're really knit. So I'm going to say here in northern New Mexico, families tend to be knit a lot tighter. So I'm from Cuesta, so I totally, Cuesta, Taos area. I actually went to school here at McCurdy for a while. So I know that our family types really link up, but I do know that our children run away from rural New Mexico, northern New Mexico. And so we have to kind of be thinking about what's going to be happening, because life is not the same as it used to be. Where you live next to your parents, it's really easy now for your children to move across the country or to move into another country if they wanted to. And the idea is, well, if I'm only a 6-hour flight from my parents, or if I'm only a 6-hour flight from family. But I think we all know that good intentions never really manifest themselves. So we have to maybe plan a little bit about what's my future going to look like as I'm aging in place. And aging in place is basically, as I'm getting older, can I handle the house that I live in? And so having that family support is really important. But I think we need to plan like there may not be the family support that we imagined we would like to have. So we have to just take a look at what's going to happen. So when my mother passed away, and me and my brother were talking last night, when my mother passed away, my dad was afraid that the family was going to make a decision for him. You're going to go into a nursing home, or whatever it was. All of us rallied and we rotated taking care of him, but I know that lots of families can't do that. We was fortunate. There were 6 of us to rotate. But he was concerned, and he asked my brother, says, what did the family decide? Am I going to go into a nursing home? I was like, no, you're going to stay home if that's what you want to do. But a lot of times that's a decision that families make. And so we kind of want to empower people before that time frame. Position yourself in a place where you know that you're going to be where you want to be as long as you can. So like I say, my personal experience, my parents, and I credit my dad. He made some, in my opinion, very courageous decisions in his mid-60s. My mother was from Cuesta, and she was born in Cuesta and was planning to die in Cuesta. My dad sold her stuff and moved her up to Albuquerque with us because we had 3 siblings living there. And my mother, and I heard it for years, was upset about all of the stuff she had accumulated that my dad was not willing to haul. My mother had a couch fetish, a big heavy desk fetish, and a hutch fetish. Like every room had all of that. So if it was up to her, we would never have gotten rid of them. So my dad being very courageous and realizing he was going to need help because my mother had the beginning stages of Parkinson's. So although we would all drive and visit, that was going to be much more of a challenge as that began to progress. And so my father bought a home there. In his mid-60s, he bought another one that was going to be their forever home. But by that time, he was already in his 70s. He couldn't make those decisions to make the jump. He was trying to get his siblings to move into that house where they would live closer and provide help. That worked for a little while. One of my sisters lived there, but she didn't need as much help at that time. And what I discovered, because I was willing to be that person. I'll get a house that accommodates my parents. And so I talked to my dad. I had an opportunity to rent a house that had a room perfect. It had its own room, had its own bathroom. And what was surprising to me was, no, I don't want to live with you. Nothing personal. I think it was that they wanted to maintain their independence. They did not want to become my child and feel that I was going to order them around, or it was my rules. Or I have little kids who were, at that time, they were smaller and loud, and I have pets that maybe they don't like. Those are a lot of things that the parent was beginning to say, I don't want to live with you, nothing personal, it's just I don't want to become your child. And so it was impossible for me to move in with him because his house was too small to accommodate. And so what happened for about 5 years, me and my siblings rotated care. Rotated care. And I think that we were fortunate to do that, but I think that most families probably couldn't have done that. Most of us were at least 40 years old or older, and we all had teenage kids that could help. What made it easier was his house was easy to care for. So I think as you're getting older, maybe that's something to consider, is consider getting into a smaller home. As I was having more and more experiences like that, my wife was she's a very generous person. And she had a client who was 80 years old. That 80-year-old client, she thought she would just care for her for maybe 4 years. Well, she lived to be 97. 97. And what we discovered in watching her life was that she couldn't make decisions anymore. So she knew she had boxes and boxes. She must have been born right around 1910. She had everything from that generation and that time frame. So she said, well, let's go ahead and get rid of some stuff. They bring out a box, they pull out one item. So should we get rid of this? And then the story would start. I remember President whoever was president at the time, and this long story. Let's just put that back in the box and we'll save it for another day. Never could make the decision to move on. And so in the course of time, their family made a decision. So we're going to move you, Mom. We're going to move you out of your house, and we're going to put you in assisted living, very nice assisted living. We're going to sell your house and put you in there. And I think the family felt like they were doing her a service, but they had been in that house for probably 40 or 50 years. So when you have somebody who's been in their house 40 or 50 years, you're not selling a house. You're selling memories. You're selling their entirety of their life. And so she waited too late to make the change. The family, I feel, made some bad decisions. Now that I'm in the business, I probably would have done something different. They sold the house. They put her in a very expensive place to live. It was running them $5,000 a month. So they burned through all of the value of the house in about 2 years. So about $60,000 a year, and went through the whole value of the house in 2 years. And then they had to put her into a much more substandard assisted living. And I think she was there probably at least a good 5 to 7 years in a really unhappy state. There are other things they probably could have done. There are times where a reverse mortgage allows you to stay into your house for the rest of your life, and you hope you live as long as you can to get your money's worth. But if you don't, you can always sell the house. The money can stay with the family. So there were things that they could have done where she could have been where she wanted to be. So you can age in place. So that's one example of a person, I think, that made probably the wrong decision. And the other one was one of my own, as I looked at my own relatives. My mother-in-law, my wife's mother, she fell in Montana. She was living on her own. She was independent. She fell. She was down for maybe 3 days before the mailman realized she was not responding, wasn't visible. So we flew out to Montana to bring her home with us, thinking, oh, she'll be so happy living with us. She was not happy living with us. Same thing happened with my wife's uncle. He was in California. He had a stroke. We flew out there to rescue him, brought him home. He hated living with us. Not that we're bad to live with. It's just that he hated not having his own independence. So I said, well, I'll buy a bigger house, we all fit in. I bought a house, and this is his words: I won't step foot into that house. And so he made himself a miserable burden to people until he could get his own place. He's happy now, but he has his own place. And so the things that I've learned is, just like when people come to me with the open house, I'm looking for this kind of house for my parent, of whom I haven't talked to about this, and they're going to move in with me and they're going to love it. They're probably not. I have another client, they're out of northern New Mexico. Their mother lived a little bit north of Cuesta, a little town called Cerro, and she needed some assistance. They brought her in to live. They had a very nice house in Corrales, New Mexico. She never left the room. She would come out, eat, and go back into the room. Once she was better, they put her back into her house. She was happy as can be. So I began to really see that trying to find some way to keep people aging within their home is ideal and probably the best way to do it. And so like I say, I kind of got started on discovering this. Went through the open houses I did. The other thing is I had my sister's friend, her dad, he was getting older. I think he's still living. And they wanted me to sell the house. And I thought, well, this keeps happening to me. I should get really good at this kind of, I don't want to call it service. To me, it's really a ministry. I love old people. Just because of my parents, I love that generation. So I thought, well, how can I help them? And the more I studied, the more I realized the way I can help them is how can I keep them in their house longer, independent. Because like I say, I can help somebody sell a house that doesn't work for them, buy a house that really doesn't work for them, then sell that house to help them buy the house they should have bought. And I tell my clients, I says, it's really beneficial for me because I get paid every time. I said, but this is not what you want. This is not what you want. You really want to work some way to keep them in their house as long as possible, or have the conversation of let's talk about the house you have, Mom and Dad. We can't take care of it. My dad always wanted me to take care of all of his properties and all of his stuff. And it was a challenge. It was a challenge. I had my whole life, and then he wanted me to take care of his house and take care of all of his projects. I just was so limited on, I had my own kids, were teenagers. So I think having those conversations early and telling them, what matters to us is the memories with you and not the house. I was just up in northern New Mexico yesterday, and I drove by our old house. And I was surprised. It really didn't have any value to me. And then I went and I drove to my aunt's house. She's 92. She has pictures of all of the family. And I interacted with all of my cousins. And for me, that's where the memories were. We told all the stories that aren't associated with the house. And so whenever I need to spend some time with my parents, I don't drive across northern New Mexico to go see my parents' home. I drive to Santa Fe, and it was brilliant on my dad's part. He says, I'm going to get buried in the National Cemetery because he was a World War II veteran, because he knew that his kids wouldn't have to take care of his gravesite, because we probably wouldn't. But I go talk to them. I told my sister, I was up in Santa Fe talking to Mom and Dad, and she says, what'd they say? Not much, they mostly listened. They mostly listened. So every time I go through Santa Fe, I stop in, I sit at their grave, I take a picture of the weather, I send it out to all my siblings. So to me, that's where the memories are, where I can go sit there and think about what it was like. So trying to maybe talk your parents out of a house that's going to be not going to be beneficial for them is probably a good idea. If they have a ranch, if they have a 2-story, if they have things that someday they're not going to be able to do, I think maybe having those conversations, or if you are approaching that age, for us, with my wife, she had the client who is in her 80s, and we determined we're going to downsize now while we can make those decisions. We try not to get attached to anything because my kids aren't going to care about it. They're not going to take care of it. They're going to have the mother of all garage sales, and all of these special items are going to either end up at the Goodwill, the trash, or somebody's home. My brother, my dad, before, as he was getting older, my brother had a big warehouse. And my dad, while he was gone, came and brought all of his stuff into his garage. And my brother told him, it says, "Dad, why didn't you take this to the dump?" And he says, "Oh no, they charge at the dump." So my dad, being of the Depression era, always saved cans of nails, cans of screws, someday bolts, nuts, and he would say, "You want these?" And I said, "Yes, I will take them," and I would throw them away. 'Cause, it wasn't the type of work that I do, so he would always give me a hard time. "How are you going to get by without all of these?" I'm like, "I don't do that kind of work, Dad." But I'm going to say that one of the times that it was successful is my sister's father-in-law, he moved in with them. And that's been one of the few times where I've seen an aging parent move in with the family and do well. And I got to really thinking about that. It's like, well, what makes him different? And what made him different was he really didn't have any attachments to material things. I think he was renting, so he didn't have like a house of his own. He didn't have an accumulation of items. And when he came in, he wasn't leaving anything behind. So I think I learned something from that, because I tend to gather. Are you like that? I gather stuff. I throw stuff out, I come back, and there's twice as much back in that empty space. So for me, I plan on, I want to simplify my life as much as possible so that later it's easier for me, because I won't have those decisions. Because I know that my dad, he was able to make that decision at 65, and it was very hard. But for the next house that was going to be the forever home, he couldn't. Never happened. So I think positioning ourselves early, like I say, so me and my wife said, let's do that to help them. Some of my other clients that I have, they're in that age range of 55 to 65. Some of them have moved into adult communities, and they fought me on it. They fought me on it. It says, "Well, we don't want to live in that." And so I go visit them sometimes because that's what I do. And I found them to be perfect. I walked in there, I was like, "Man, I wish I was 55. I like it here." So I send all my clients there, and they come back surprised. I said, I went over there determined that I was going to hate that. But it was actually ideal for where they were in the stage of life. They force you to send your grandchildren home. You don't have to maintain a yard, but they have all those amenities there if you want them. And so I would say that's been one of my successful clients that are right now in the process of moving. The other one that I have who really is, he's really courageous. I have a client who they're probably about 78, young couple, about 78. They lived in Santa Fe. They had a wonderful house, and it was single story, but they needed to move to Albuquerque. So moving out of Santa Fe to move to Albuquerque is not what most people want to do. But his son and his family lived in Albuquerque, and so they knew we're going to be closer to support. And the other thing is where they lived in Santa Fe was very hilly. So it was really hard for them to go for walks. Just simple things were difficult. And so in their late 70s, they made, to me, that was just a courageous decision to say, you know what, we're going to leave this wonderful house so that we can make sure that our final years, we're more able to have a lifestyle that is more enjoyable for us. And I think that's kind of maybe what you need to look at it as is, don't think about your kids coming back to visit you. Think about what's going to give me the most amount of life in my final days. I know that for my dad, he was very industrious, but as he got older, he couldn't take care of all the things that he used to. He was working on a sprinkler one day, and he couldn't get off the ground, so he rolled to a tree and shimmied up the tree. And for him, he knew it's like, okay, life has really changed for me. So, and I think regardless of how good you take care of your body and your mind, something can and eventually will happen to us. And putting yourself in a place where you can live and age the best that you can. And so one of the folks who was supposed to be speaking with me, and I'm talking a long time just because I was going to lean on them, they were a group called By Your Side. So if that's a situation that you're looking at, in aging in place as long as you can, By Your Side was a group that I talked to that were a wonderful resource for helping elderly people stay in their home longer. Without being a huge burden to the rest of the family. Or if there is no family, it gives you that option. And, you know, we just kind of want to look at what's going to give us that best amount of time there. Things that I tell people to kind of look for, things that I have people kind of look for in their house is, when you're trying to make that transition, the first thing I tell people is stop talking about the home you're living in. You're not allowed to call it a home anymore. It is a house. So, because I get people who go through grief, and it's a real thing. They go through grief because they're emotionally attached to their house. And for my sellers, I tell them, you're not allowed to call this a house or a home. You can call it a house. You need to start breaking off that emotional attachment. Your new place is going to be your home. And then this one is just the house. And it's hard at first, but I've moved from a lot of houses that I've been attached to and I forget about. Out of sight, out of mind. Your new environment becomes your home. And so I think if we begin to tell ourselves that this is no longer my house, or this is no longer my home, this is my house. The other thing is, looking for a place that offers you things that you can go out and come in without incident. For me, this tends to be, look for a single story at ground level, and look for a neighborhood that doesn't have steep inclines. Because when your family drops you off on the driveway and you're like this, you have to get out of the car. So there's lots of houses like that, you'll find it. So the other thing is, if you're going to be driving, put yourself in a location where you're not having to drive through a lot of congested areas that are really tricky. I'm not that old, but I can't drive like I used to. I'm like, I really have to think things through. And I'm always encouraged by people in their 80s and 90s who are still driving. I'm like, more power to you. I know everybody else is angry at you, but I'm actually proud of you. And find places that have social events that are there. And that's really kind of why I like those 55 plus communities, because they have everything there. And then the people that are there of your own era, you have a lot of things in common. And then finding a house that's easy to maintain on the outside. I'm not going to recommend you go get a half-acre lot or a 1 acre lot. That's impossible for me to take care of, and I got a lot of energy. And then the other thing is, you know, are you able to take care of and do the chores around the house? And so when I tell people about aging in place, those are things that I recommend. Having a house with views may not matter, especially if your eyesight is no good.
from here to there.
Yeah, and even a few stairs can be really treacherous. Even 1 or 2 stairs can be a problem. I had a home that I was holding open this past Sunday, and it fit the criteria of a single story, 4-bedroom. I knew why they were there. And this poor lady almost fell down. I'm ready to catch her. And I was like, this isn't the right house for you. This isn't the right house for you. And your family may or may not be able to provide the kind of care you need. Like I say, with my mother, she had Parkinson's, but we had an army of us. We had 4 siblings who lived in the state, and a lot of us had kids. It's like, you are watching Grandma and Grandpa tonight. So we had that ability. I think that most families today don't. And so I think you have to kind of plan accordingly for that. And so I'll finish up with this, and then I'll open it up for any questions you might have. You know, I think my dad was probably one of the smartest people I've ever met. He was really great. He thought about those things beforehand. And in spite of the resistance of my mother, she was not happy. She just dug her heels in. But he knew that her health was going to be declining and there was no way he could handle taking care of her. Even with us there, it was very difficult. So he made a really courageous decision to move her there. And while I was putting this all together, I had so much more of an appreciation for what he did and more of a conscious conviction that I need to put myself at a place, because I don't know where my kids are going to be. My son is currently in Philadelphia. Is he going to be around when I'm older? I don't know. My daughter still lives with me. It's like, am I going to be taking care of her when I'm 85? Hopefully not. I will kick her out before then. I already put pressure on her. It's like, time to be an adult. Get out. I love you, but it's good for you to move out. And there are options available for people. I don't know that buyer side group is here, but if they're not, they will know somebody who is. They'll be able to make recommendations. I know that for lots of other clients that I knew, they were able to find funding for them to have the care they needed to be at home. And there's just things that are beneficial. So as we look into the next decade, we're going to see that the population above 65 is going to probably grow to about 70 million. And so for us who are here, let's try and put ourselves in a place where we're prepared for that. And if you have an aging parent, you know, there are some really good resources to help them where they're at. So that's all I have to talk about, but I'll open it up for questions and answers. I'll be honest, some of this is not my specialty because I'm a realtor. I'm a realtor, so I can probably help with some of the aspects of housing, but I see a lot. As a realtor, people buy and sell homes when they're having a big life event happen. They're having children, getting married, getting divorced, children moving out, parents dying. Big life events is when people come to us. So for me, I sell houses on the side, but for the most part, I seem to be a life counselor. So anybody any questions or thoughts or maybe experiences that you felt were the same or anybody here can learn from? Don't make me call you out.
Daniel?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much, Daniel. That was really heartfelt, and you know, just helped me to sort of realize the scope of the things to think about, both for myself, because yeah, I'm 62 and I actually injured myself on my stairs, and it took almost a whole year to heal from that. I'm like, and I've lived there 20 years, you know, so it's time to start thinking about letting go of those attachments and maybe thinking about the next place that we might want to live. I was thinking about what you said about not being attached to a home. My parents have lived in the same house for almost 60 years. It's where I grew up.
Okay.
They're 92. and we're actually going out for Thanksgiving. And this year we decided, because it's too much now for my parents to have everybody descend on the house. You know, we all live somewhere else, so we all come in and visit. So my dad, he's very savvy, and he said, I'm going to rent an Airbnb. And I'm excited because, you know, it'll be less pressure on my parents. We won't have to like rearrange their whole house so that we can all, but I'm feeling a little sad because we won't be staying in the home where I grew up. So, but what you said really made sense. You know, it's not the house, it's the people in it and the memories. And we'll make new memories, even if we're staying at somebody else's house. So I really appreciate your sharing about that. And I just have one question because I know that at some point, I know my parents want to age in place. They did a reverse mortgage. They've been really, really smart about everything, and they have a wonderful home, and it's perfect for them to stay in. But I'm thinking ahead, you know, when and if the time comes that they can't maybe care for themselves. My dad's already told me he wants to have somebody else take care of him. And I understand why, because you know how it is with families, you know. They love it when I visit, but they also love it when we leave.
Right.
All my instincts as a daughter, that I want to be there for them and take care of them. So I'm just curious how you all did it. I mean, you rotated, so that was probably good. Does it work out for people to have like regular care and then just have their kids come maybe every couple of months just to see them and be with them? How does that work?
My parents had regular care that was somehow government funded during the day, that 8 to 5 window. So they had somebody that was there during the day, which was perfect for us because I went to work. I generally had weekends, Friday night and Sunday night, because I have no social life. So Friday night I would stay there with him, or Saturday night, I don't remember, I've forgotten. I think it was Friday and Saturday night were my nights. And that was harder for the rest of the siblings to do an overnight. So for me, that was actually no big deal. I just stayed there. It gave me a break from my family. It gave me a break from my family. But I think the challenge was that my mother had Parkinson's. And so there was the care of that, but Parkinson's is hard on the other spouse because there's this weird competition thing that was between my mom and my dad where she felt like she needed more attention. So she was really hard on him. It wasn't her. It was the disease. So, I mean, it's nothing that she was doing. It was just the disease was that way. Or sometimes she just had needs that were incessant and somebody gave her a bell to call for help. I'm like I think we took the bell and incinerated it after she passed away. So that was some of the challenges. Sometimes she would just imagine things that you had to accommodate even though they really were unreasonable. So those things got a little tiring. So it was good that we had a rotation. But having support was really, really helpful. My dad probably had too complex of a house. He had too complex of a house. Fortunately, I had a lot of skills to take care of all his whole watering system, and he was kind of engineering minded, and so, you know, my sisters was like, I don't know how to take care of this, can you take care of it? So I think having a simpler home makes a big difference, and simplifying. If they have a yard that's hard to maintenance, go with the Xeriscape. Start making those kinds of decisions, otherwise it's going to become a weed fest. And I think there was a question in the back.
Well, I was just going to say, I totally agree with trying to plan ahead. As you all know, I talk about the health care, but my husband and I moved into an apartment.
Sure, you're welcome.
And we love it. And all of our friends that come over now are saying, you know, do they have an apartment here for us? Because they had never thought about it. You know, you're too young at 70 to move into an apartment and sell your house. But they're thinking, maybe it isn't so bad. And we just absolutely love being in an apartment. I watch them do the lawn. I call them to change my light bulbs. And we have time to go out and do the things we want to do.
So, as a landlord or property investor, I have several clients who have credit scores well into the 800s, could absolutely buy a house. But they love, hey Daniel, this thing is stocked up, can you send somebody? And I don't mind, because I just say, hey, ABC Plumbing, can you schedule them? It's not a big deal, but for them, even though some of them are very intelligent people, they would rather spend their time living life and say, you know what, I'm gonna leave town and I'm not gonna worry about it, because if there is a problem, one of my neighbors is gonna make the call to say, hey, we have a problem. So, like I say, that adult living communities are fantastic. And for me personally, when I went there, I was still in my 40s, which was last year. I was still in my 40s, and I told my wife, I was like, I wish that I was 55. I love this place. And it was a little bit more expensive than buying a regular house because of all the amenities that were there. But my clients who sold their house, they had the swimming pool, their house was the party house. Everybody came there, and they were actually relieved. It's like, our house doesn't have to be available to everybody. We have all of that here. I don't have to take care of the pool. I don't have to maintenance anything, but I still get to enjoy it. So all my clients that are of that generation or age group, I'm sending them there. They all go there. Oh, I don't think this is going to work. They go there. It's like, where do we sign up? Where do we sign up? It's really, it's an ideal, it's a great situation because you can have really good support that's there because everybody there has a network of people who help them. So.
There's, in Europe, there's more of a movement, but I wonder if you've heard of it, of kind of intentional communities where people live in kind of, they have their own apartments, but there's like a central community area, but it's not one of these, you know, like you're talking about, it's not really expensive, it's affordable. In city centers, do you know if Santa Fe or Albuquerque, are they thinking about these kinds of things in their...
You're seeing more of, in Albuquerque, it's going to be more of like the Del Webb communities. Depending on, you can spend as much as you want to, or you can find something that's relatively affordable. There are some that are there. So here's the funny thing is that baby boomers and the millennials are looking for the same thing. They're looking for a small apartment that has a common area, but not near each other. Meaning they both want to live in the same type of community, but definitely not near one another. No millennials, no baby boomer crossover. But if they have their own communities, they're actually really happy. So that's probably, I think you're going to see more and more development like that. I know that my communities that I have out there that are like that, they can't build houses fast enough. They can't build houses fast enough. So I think you'll see more of it, but I'm going to say probably the sooner you go into that kind of situation, the better, so it won't be so competitive. Was there a question up here?
I was going to ask you, I have a daughter that's 34 that has cerebral palsy.
Okay.
And she had one good hand that she was able to wheel herself with a one-arm drive.
Okay.
And then she landed up with having to have an anterior disectomy.
Okay.
With fusion.
Okay.
So she's lost complete use of her hand. So, you know, we have her, and I always worry because we have a big house that is totally handicap accessible.
Okay.
Do these communities have...
Some of them do. Some of them do. Some of them do. Actually, a lot of them are becoming more and more ADA compliant because they know that the population coming in, they themselves may have a walker or may have a wheelchair themselves as the homeowner. So it's not going to be a problem for them to accommodate that. I do know that. And it's just a matter of which builder you go with. So there are different levels of builders. Just depends on what you're looking for. I don't really want to make recommendations unless it's like on a one-on-one because I'm not really sponsoring any of them. So, but there are definitely builders who can do that. And then also for rentals, if that's what you need, you can have that built into a rental. So as a property investor, I can't restrict somebody from making the home ADA compliant. Now, when they move out, they need to put it back if they've done major structural changes. But if they've tapped into funding to do that, I can't restrict them from doing that, nor would I really want to. And they call me periodically because they test to, hi, I'm in a wheelchair. I was wondering, can I make these changes? And I know it's the government. I'm like, oh, absolutely, we'd love to. When can I meet you? I said, well, let me get back to you. I always know that that's just somebody who's testing it. But they're looking for people who are discriminating. So they can't discriminate against that. So there's options for that. And if a landlord can't do that, then definitely we know that a builder is going to make those exceptions. And most of their homes, a lot of the newer building styles are already there, especially in a 55-plus community. So, yeah.
Sorry, I keep asking questions, but
No, I don't mind.
do you have resources? So I imagine that there are some in-home care services, some that are nonprofit, some that are government, some that are, you pay for. I'm sure there's a whole range of services for, people that have to stay and age in place. How do you find it? Is there one central resource for that? Or?
Like I said, the best one that I found was that By Your Side group. I'm going to say that probably Gail's going to, you have probably tons of resources for that, right?
For aging in place?
Aging in place as far as people who help provide or...
I know a few folks.
Yeah, so if they don't do it where you're at, they're probably networked into the area. So I found that the By Your Side group, to me, were the best ones I've ran into. And they will help you find whatever funding as well. So
Sometimes the senior affairs departments also have some resources that you can tap into, or at least they know people to refer you to.
yeah, that's actually a great point. And I'll probably do a series on this. I think, so if you find me online, it's my last name, GaillourGroup.com. I'll probably put together some video series on this.
So thank you to Daniel for a wonderful presentation. Let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you.